Introduction to Classical Tibetan, Lesson 5-2, the Ladin particle. On Wednesday, we learned that the Ladin particle can be used to show the direct object of some transitive verbs, as well as to show location in space and time. There are several other uses of the Ladin, which we'll cover today. 6 of the Ladin particles, that is, all of them except for na, can be used to show the aim or purpose of an action. We usually translate this as in order to, or for. The most common way of indicating this is by writing the infinitive form of a verb followed by la. For example, kuncho sum la kyapsu chio. Chi means go. How does one go? One goes for refuge, kyapsu. One goes for refuge in what? In the 3 jewels, kuncho sum la. One goes for refuge in the 3 jewels. Another use of the Ladin is to show the indirect object that benefits from an action. We usually translate this as for the sake of, for, to, and so on. For example, we can say semchen tamche la changsem kiedo. The verb here is ke, create or generate. What is generated? Changsem, an awakened mind. And for whom is an awakened mind generated? Semchen tamche la, for the sake of all sentient beings. One generates an awakened mind for the sake of all sentient beings. Look at the examples on page 65 and 66 of your textbook for practice with these types of constructions. The Ladin particles, except for na, are often associated with words that mean benefit or purpose. For example, dundu means for the sake of, chedu means for the purpose of, and chirdu means in order to. Another use of the Ladin is to create adverbs. Adverbs are formed by su, ru, tu, du, and ra, but are usually not made by adding la or na. This is similar to the way in which the agentive particle can create adverbs. For example, dempa means truth. Denpar means truly. Gyun means continuum. Gyundu means continuously. In Classical Tibetan, there are a number of common words that look like adverbs but are not necessarily translated as such. These were developed by Tibetan translators who translated Buddhist texts from Sanskrit into Tibetan, and they usually serve to emphasize certain words. They correspond to Sanskrit prefixes called upasargas. If you're not familiar with Sanskrit, it can sometimes be tricky to get the hang of this usage of words in Classical Tibetan. These words can often be left untranslated when translating from Tibetan into English. Pages 67 and 68 of your textbook have examples of the most common upasargas. If you're looking at texts that were originally composed in Sanskrit, you will likely run into many of these prefixes, so it's good to at least be aware of them for now. These are the most important functions of Ladin, but there are a few other uses of the particle that you will come across as you read Tibetan. When something is equated to something, the Ladin particle as su, ru, tu, du, or ra can be used. In this case, it usually gets translated as. For example, semchen tamche pa marche. This means 1, inferred here because there's no subject, knows all sentient beings as one's parents. The Ladin particle here attached to pama gets translated as. Let's try this one. Korwe dunge de war tongo. 1 sees the suffering of samsara as happiness. Sometimes the particle la, but not any of the other 6 forms of Ladin, can indicate the topic that is being discussed, in much the same way as the emphatic ni particle. This is commonly seen in texts. We frequently see constructions such as de la, regarding that, or tangpo la, as for the first. This especially is frequently found in texts that enumerate lists and then go on to describe each of those elements in the list. Finally, the Ladin particle can be used to form compound verbs. This is done by placing a Ladin particle between 2 verbs or between a verb and an adjective. For example, nyamsu lempa literally means to take into experience. This is usually translated as practice. Kyapsu droa to go, for, refuge. Your textbook has more examples of these types of constructions. As you can see, there are a lot of uses of the latent particle. To review, the particle can mark the direct object of a transitive verb. It can show location in space or time. It can indicate the purpose or benefit of an action. It can turn nouns or adjectives into adverbs. It can equate two things. It can indicate the topic of discussion, and it can be used to form compound verbs. The latent particle is the most difficult particle to understand in Tibetan grammar because of all of its different uses. As you practice reading Tibetan, you'll get more familiar with the use of this particle over time.